They say love is blind, but I never knew how dark it could get until I stumbled into the shadows of someone else's secrets. What started as a fairy tale turned into a nightmare I never saw coming. My name is Lena, and this is how the man I loved made me the unknowing sponsor of his double life.
People always say you know when you've met the right person. I thought I had that moment when I met Daniel. It was a late spring afternoon in Marseille-sur-Mer at a quiet little book cafe tucked between an antique store and a florist. I was sketching by the window, something I often did after work to clear my head, when he leaned over with the cappuccino in his hand and said, "I don't know what's more beautiful, your drawing or the look of concentration on your face." Cheesy? Absolutely. But something about the way he said it didn't feel rehearsed. It felt sincere. He sat down and we talked for hours about art, about travel, about the kind of childhood memories that usually take years to share. I left with his number written in ink on a napkin. Within a week, we were texting constantly. 2 weeks later, we were on our first weekend getaway. By the end of the month, I'd given him a key to my apartment. Looking back, it all moved too fast. But at the time, it felt magical, like fate had finally stopped overlooking me and decided I deserved a real, grown-up love story. I didn't know I was falling into a carefully crafted performance. To me, it was the beginning of forever. To him, it was the opening scene of a con. 3 months in, Daniel suggested we move in together. I remember the moment vividly. We were walking home from late dinner, hand in hand under streetlights that made everything feel cinematic. He stopped, looked at me with those warm hazel eyes and said, "Why go back and forth between two places when we could wake up together every day?" I hesitated. My apartment was small, cluttered with half-finished art projects and thrifted furniture. It wasn't exactly a Pinterest dream. But Daniel was persuasive. "Let's find a new place, a fresh start for both of us." He was charming, thoughtful, convincing. So we found a place. A bright, airy apartment near the harbor with tall windows and creaky floorboards. He called it our little nest. We painted the walls ourselves. He let me choose the colors. "You're the artist," he'd say. "This place should feel like you." But when it came to the lease, he insisted it go in my name, said he had a credit issue from a failed venture and it would just complicate things. It sounded reasonable at the time. I paid the deposit, I paid the rent, the utilities, most of the furniture, but he contributed in other ways, making dinner, rubbing my feet after long days, whispering how lucky he was to have me. Love made me generous. I didn't know I was setting the stage for a financial trap, one where I'd be the only investor and he'd be living a double life on my dime. The beginning was dreamy, but reality has a way of leaking through even the most carefully painted fairy tales. The first crack showed up on a random Tuesday. I just signed a new client for my design studio and wanted to surprise Daniel with takeout from his favorite Thai place. I got home early, lit candles, put on music, and waited. But he didn't come. Not at 7, not at 8, not at 9. At 10:23 p.m., a text finally arrived. "Sorry, babe. Got pulled into a late meeting in Bordeaux. Don't wait up. Love you." Bordeaux? He hadn't even mentioned a trip. I'd tried to shake off the feeling, told myself I was being dramatic. But once the doubt creeps in, it doesn't leave quietly. Over the next few weeks, little things added up. Phone calls he took in the bathroom. Laptops that snapped shut when I walked in. Withdrawals from our joint card I didn't recognize. When I asked him about the $850 that had disappeared overnight, He smiled and said, "Just covered a supplier. I'll pay you back this weekend." He didn't. I wanted to believe him so badly. I silenced my instincts. I chalked it up to stress, ambition, growing pains. But deep down, something was already rotting beneath the surface. I just didn't know the smell of betrayal yet.
The truth came not in a thunderstorm of drama, but in a quiet message that struck harder than lightning ever could. It was a Thursday afternoon. I was home working on mock-ups when my phone buzzed with a message request from an unknown number. The name read Claire. The message was short. "Hi, are you Lena? I think we need to talk. It's about Daniel." I felt the blood rush from my face. Heart racing, I called the number. She answered almost immediately. Her voice was steady, but cold. "Sorry to drop this on you, but I just found out who you are. I'm with Daniel. I've been with him for almost a year. We live together. We have a baby." My throat closed. I couldn't breathe. She kept talking, filling in the details. The trips, the overlap, the lies. Apparently, I was his business partner, the woman who helped with finances and admin. She had no idea we were a couple, just like I had no idea she existed. I listened numb. Then I thanked her. I told her she wasn't to blame. And when the call ended, I collapsed. Everything, the dinners, the plans, the shared home, crumbled around me. I had been financing another woman's dream life, built on my love and my blind trust. And the man I thought I'd spend my life with, he'd never even been real. After hanging up with Claire, I sat in stunned silence. The walls around me, the ones I had painted with him, decorated with memories, suddenly felt foreign, like they belonged to someone else. I needed proof. Not because I doubted her, but because some fragile part of me still hoped this was a misunderstanding. I waited until Daniel returned that evening. His smile was effortless. A kiss, a joke, a request for dinner. I wanted to vomit. While he was in the shower, I opened his briefcase. Inside was a folder of receipts, handwritten notes, and there it was, an apartment lease. Not ours, another address, another part of town. The next day, I followed it. I sat in my car, heart pounding like a drum, and watched as Daniel walked into the building with a stroller. Claire opened the door. A baby cooed in the background, and Daniel kissed her. I took a picture, not for revenge, but because I needed something solid to hold on to when the lies became too slippery to grasp. He had another life, another family. And the sickest part? He was using my money to fund it. The betrayal didn't just destroy me emotionally, it devastated me financially. That night, I opened every account, every statement, every bank notification I had ignored or blindly trusted him with. Over 30,000 euros gone. He had used my card for furniture, luxury baby items, and even a vacation I never went on. I remembered the week he claimed to be attending a tech summit. Turns out, he was at a seaside resort with her. I found the receipt in his email, tucked into a folder labeled consulting. It wasn't just lies. It was premeditated fraud. I sat at my desk until morning, surrounded by printouts and bank alerts, my eyes burning from the screen in tears. I had been in love. He had been in business. And I was the bank. The worst part? I blamed myself for being too trusting, too available, too eager to build a future with a man who had already built one somewhere else. But something in me began to harden that night. The version of me that once made excuses for him started to die, and the woman who replaced her, she wanted answers. The next day,
I waited until Daniel got home. No screaming, no crying, just silence. And the folder. I placed it on the kitchen table like a weapon. He saw the lease, the receipts, the photo. His face paled, his mouth opened. But I didn't give him time to speak. Claire knows, I know, you're done. At first he denied it, reflexively, like a child caught stealing. Then came the excuses. It's complicated. I didn't mean to hurt you. You don't understand. But I did. I understood that every dinner he made was followed by a withdrawal from my card, that every business trip was a weekend with another woman, that every moment I was falling deeper, he was calculating what more he could take. I told him to leave. He laughed. You can't afford this place without me. The irony nearly broke me. I had always paid for everything. I didn't respond. I walked upstairs, locked the door, called a locksmith. By morning, the locks were changed. He was out. Physically, at least. Emotionally, he still haunted every corner. The days that followed felt like crawling through broken glass. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I ran on coffee and vengeance. But grief is strange. It doesn't just hurt, it reveals. I began to see how much of myself I had dimmed for Daniel, how I shrunk my success so he'd feel less insecure, how I laughed off red flags, avoided questions, and gave more than I had. My friends were shocked when I told them, not because Daniel had lied, but because I had never told them how much I was sacrificing. I had kept up the facade of a happy, thriving couple, but truthfully, I had been in love alone. I started therapy, I filed a fraud report, and I closed every joint account. Claire and I stayed in touch, not as allies, but as survivors. She left him too. Turns out, she was just as deceived. He had told her I was emotionally unstable, a clingy colleague he felt sorry for. Our lies had been twisted into a script he directed, but not anymore. The script was mine now, and I was rewriting the ending. What I didn't expect in the aftermath of it all was the shame. People often think betrayal leaves you angry, and yes, it does. But there's something quieter, more corrosive. The belief that maybe you let it happen, that maybe you weren't smart enough to spot it, that maybe you deserved it. I replayed every conversation, every touch, every intimate moment, and questioned what was real. Was he ever in love with me? Was I just a paycheck with a pulse? I felt humiliated, exposed, like my heart had been paraded for sport. But then, one morning, as I brushed my teeth, I looked at myself in the mirror and whispered, "This was not your fault." I said it again, louder, and again, until my voice drowned out his. I was lied to, stolen from, manipulated. But I was not the villain in this story. I was the victim who survived. And now, I was becoming the woman who would rise. In the weeks that followed, the quiet was deafening. There was no more clinking of Daniel's coffee mug in the morning, no random messages during the day, no presence at all, just silence. But silence, I learned, isn't empty. It echoes. And in that echo, I heard every ignored intuition, every moment I had swallowed my own voice to keep his love. At first, I filled the silence with noise, music, podcasts, calls to friends. But eventually, I let it sit. I let myself feel everything. I cried for the woman who thought she had finally found forever. I mourned the future I had imagined, a family, a home, a life shared with someone I thought loved me back. But the strangest feeling of all was the stillness. There was no more uncertainty, no more wondering when the next lie would surface. And in that stillness, I found a sliver of peace. Yes, I was alone, but I was no longer being lied to. And that, I realized, was the beginning of something pure: freedom. A week after the confrontation, Claire and I met in person. It was awkward at first. Two women bound by betrayal. But over coffee, the walls crumbled. We shared timelines, photos, screenshots. She showed me pictures of their child, who, ironically, shared a middle name Daniel once suggested for our future daughter. It made me nauseous. She told me how he would disappear for days under the excuse of work trips, just like he had with me. He had even used the same terms of endearment, the same birthday dinner menu, the same exact cologne he said he wore only for me. It was like he had a playbook, and we were interchangeable cast members. Claire had also been helping him financially, though not as much. He'd framed me as the career-driven boss who pressured him into a business he didn't want. He made her feel like his soft place. He made me feel like his warrior. He fed us roles so we wouldn't overlap. But now, we were sitting across from each other, finally seeing the full picture. Claire cried. I didn't. My tears had dried into something else by then: resolve. He had manipulated us both, but now we weren't part of his story. We were writing our own. I started journaling everything, not just to remember, but to see the pattern. The manipulation wasn't random. It was calculated. He chose women who were independent, successful, emotionally generous. He knew how to mirror our values, mimic our dreams. He didn't just lie, he studied us. That realization sent chills down my spine. I remembered how he once told me he admired my work ethic, then casually asked to use my card just for a week. How he framed his debts as shared burdens. How he never let me meet his parents, saying they were too conservative and wouldn't accept me. Turns out they didn't even know I existed. He had always kept his lives in compartments, like a suitcase he could close and stash whenever it got too full. So I kept digging. I found old emails, dating profiles, even a third woman. Though I never spoke to her, I didn't have the strength. I reported everything to the police, but I knew justice might not come in the form of handcuffs. Instead, I focused on building a case for myself, not in court, but in truth. The truth was ugly, but it was mine now, and he could no longer rewrite it. At some point, I stopped surviving and started living again. It didn't happen in one moment. It was slow, like thawing after a long, cruel winter. I redecorated the apartment, not with vengeance, but with intention. I sold the table we used to eat at, donated his books, burned the cologne bottle in a bonfire with Claire and two close friends. We laughed that night, really laughed. It felt like exhaling after holding my breath for years. I booked a solo trip to Lisbon, a city I had always wanted to visit, but never had the chance to because Daniel didn't like crowded places. Turns out I love crowded places. The world opened up again. I started getting new clients. I took dance lessons. I adopted a dog. Every step felt like reclaiming something he had stolen: my confidence, my curiosity, my joy. I was still healing, but I was healing loud. I no longer felt shame when someone asked, "What happened with you two?" I'd smile and say, "I got out." And every time I said it, It felt less like loss and more like liberation. In the quiet hours, I wrote letters I never planned to send. One to Daniel, one to Claire's child, and one to myself. To Daniel, I wrote, "You didn't destroy me. You revealed me." To the child, I wrote, "You deserve better than the man who fathered you." And to myself, I wrote, "Dear Lena, you are not broken. You were betrayed. There is a difference. You loved fully, honestly. That is not a weakness. It is your strength. You believed in someone who wore a mask. That doesn't make you naive. It makes him a liar. You will love again, but next time it will be with eyes wide open. And the love you give will first be your own." Writing those letters didn't fix everything, but it shifted something. They helped me release what I no longer needed to carry. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the burden. I was done letting his story dictate mine. And the woman I was becoming, she didn't need his closure. She had her own voice now, and she was ready to use it. Months passed. I hadn't heard a word from Daniel. Until one day, an email appeared in my inbox. The subject line was simple: "I'm sorry." I stared at it for hours before opening it. Inside were a few weak paragraphs, apologies for how things ended, claims that he'd been confused, and the classic line, "I still care about you." There was no mention of the money, no acknowledgement of the extent of the lies, no real accountability, just the familiar tone of a man who thought he still held some version of power over me. But he didn't. I didn't reply, because closure doesn't come from the people who hurt you. It comes from deciding you deserve peace more than revenge. I let his message sit, unopened again, a relic of who I used to be. Claire got a similar email. She deleted hers, too. We laughed about it over wine. It was wild how someone could set fire to your entire life and still believe they were old space in your heart. But I had made room for better things. For peace, for growth, for me. One night, I stood in front of the same mirror I had once cried into after discovering the truth. But this time, I saw someone else. Same face, same eyes, but a different soul. This woman didn't need validation from anyone. She didn't need to be chosen because she had chosen herself. I traced the scar where love had left its mark, and I smiled. Not because I was over it, but because I had survived it. There's power in looking at the same reflection and seeing a completely different story. I wasn't the woman who got duped. I was the woman who walked away, who refused to let a lie define her truth, who rebuilt not just her life, but her spirit. I had cried oceans, but now I was learning how to swim. And in that mirror, I saw strength. I saw dignity. I saw freedom. I've thought about the next person I might love. He's not here yet, and maybe that's okay. But if he ever comes, I'll hand him a different version of me. One who knows her worth before he ever opens his mouth. There will be no pretending, no performing, no shrinking. He'll have to meet me where I am, whole, grounded, and without apology. And I'll tell him, I've been through fire. If you're here to play games, don't waste your breath. I'm not bitter. I'm just awake. Love will return when it's ready. But I will never again confuse attention for affection. and I will never again make myself small to fit inside someone else's illusion. The next chapter will be written with honesty, with boundaries, with clarity. And if love never comes again, I'll still be okay. Because I have learned the most important truth. I am enough. There's a woman I met through all of this. She is stubborn and soft, wounded but wise. She speaks up now. She says no. She says yes, but only when she means it. She isn't fooled by charming words or empty apologies. She no longer seeks to be saved. She saves herself. That woman is me. I didn't find her in the good moments. I found her in the mess, in the betrayal, in the tears I cried on the bathroom floor. And now, she's here to stay. I built a new life, not from scratch, but from the ashes. And every day I choose her, not because she's perfect, but because she's real. And that, after everything, is what I'm most proud of. That I became the kind of woman who could lose everything and still rise. People often ask if I forgave him. The answer is, I'm still deciding. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's a door you choose whether or not to open. Some days I can touch the handle. Other days I walk past it without a second glance. What I do know is this. I don't hate him anymore. Not because he deserves peace, but because I do. Hate chains you to the past, and I'm not living there anymore. Forgiveness, if it ever comes, won't be for him. It will be for the girl I was, naive, trusting, loving with her whole heart. I forgive her first. She did her best. She believed in love. And even though it broke her, she became me. So here I am, not as the woman who got used, but as the woman who reclaimed her story. I know I'm not alone. There are others out there, hearts broken by liars, wallets emptied by charmers, dignity stripped by manipulation. To you, I say, you are not foolish for loving. You are not weak for staying too long. You are human, and you deserve more. My name is Lena, and this is my story, not his version, mine. If it resonated with you, if you saw yourself between these lines, subscribe, because more stories are coming, more voices will rise, and maybe, just maybe, you'll find the strength you've been waiting for, not in them, but in you.